have Councilmember Borneman and Councilmember Weiss with us on committee today, and we have two agenda items. The first is Greenways 4 levy. It's a resolution, and Councilmember Weiss, would you take it away?
Thank you, Roxanne. What I wanted to do was to introduce Seth Fleetwood, who is the chair of the Greenways citizen group that is working on trying to develop a proposal for a Greenways 4 levy. If everybody remembers, the Greenways 3 levy was a 10-year levy. It is set to expire at the end of next year in 2016. And so there's been an effort by the citizens group to put together information. So they're doing kind of fact-finding right now and getting information together in preparation for a Greenways 4 levy. What I will do right now is turn it over to Seth. He'll give a report on the work that the group this committee has done so far, and then at the council level, we will talk about any sort of timing or other issues or questions that we have of Seth and the committee at that point. So, Seth, it's all yours.
This is a different perspective. Yeah. I'm Seth Fleetwood. I have a long history in Greenways. First, just on a personal note, in 1994, while eating lunch one day, I responded to there was a reference in the Bellingham Herald that said, seeking Greenways committee members. And I remember that's how my involvement with Greenways began. I've often realized that my life would have been very different had I not happened to see that Bellingham Herald article that day. As was mentioned, we're at that time as we are at the end of each Greenways levy. They're all designed to sunset after acquiring a certain amount of money. And there's always a group of us who are pondering the end of the last Greenways and considering the next one. And so here we are. It's amazing how fast time's gone by, but I think they're presently anticipating that the final collection will be some time in the second half of next year, 2016. So we've done what all the others have done before. I was personally involved in the 1997 levy, which can be considered, it was known as Beyond Greenways. It was actually Greenways 2. That was the first time we set a precedent for reactivating the Greenways levy. And then that was a $20 million levy. The first one in 1990 was a $7 million levy. I think the original inspiration, and I can say this accurately, was a realization that there was this amazing opportunity to benefit from a number of vacated railroad lines. When I was a kid, there were still railroads going all over town, and they stopped for whatever reason, I think in the 70s. And they were just there, these amazing trails. And the first levy was primarily about acquiring those old vacated railroad lines. And we've got this amazing system all over town, the South Bay Trail, the line sort of parallel to Alabama going up to Lake Whatcom. There are examples of it all over town. The second Greenways levy was about trying to, I remember we used the term, create big chunks, buy some big chunks. So we're thinking parks that would connect with that trail system that we'd started with the first levy. The third one, of course, was a continuation of that. There was always an observation that we wanted to be regionally balanced in our allocation of monies. And I remember after the second Greenways levy, just because of opportunities, there were more acquisitions that seemed to be on the south side than the north side. So the third levy in 2006 was very aware of that, and there was a decision to allocate additional funds for the north side. I think the city has been quite good in emphasizing north side acquisitions. So it's always been about balance and opportunity to acquire lands where we can. The one fundamental difference with this proposal that's, I think, fair to say different than the others is that the first three levies had more of the money going to acquisition. And there is a broad consensus amongst our group that this levy should invert those ratios to some degree. Precisely what those percentage changes are still under consideration, but we've acquired a lot of land, and we all recognize that there's a need for development money to now take many of those properties and help do the things that we've hoped to do with them. I should mention that this committee was initially put together by Juliana Guy, who, as we all know, is an active citizen on the north side of town in the Cordata area. She's been so instrumental in helping with the city to spearhead acquisition of properties for parks in that area. Juliana Guy put together, I don't know if she's here or not, I didn't see her earlier, but we've got several members, most of whom are made up of Old Greenways people. Juliana Guy, John Blethen, who was part of the original 1990 levy and served on the original Greenways campaign, been involved in this stuff for years and years. Former Mayor Ken Hertz is a member of our committee. David Marshak is part of it. Ted Rosen, Alex McLean, a woman named Rosalie Nast has been serving as our taking notes for us and has been an active participant, and Stan Snap, former city council members. So we've had several meetings thus far, and we're just sort of pondering. Jack Weiss, forgive me. Forgive me, Jack. You're just up there, and so I made the... Yeah, Jack has been an active member of the committee from the very beginning. See, I make a distinction because you're also on the city council. But yeah, Jack's been at every meeting thus far. And we're just doing what one does at the beginning of these things. We're pondering what the parameters are going to be of the next levy, what the allocation ratios should be, what the timing of the levy should be, what the total amount of the levy should be. We've had members of park staff. James King has come. He's spoken to us about primarily maintenance needs of the next levy. One of the realities is that as we have this, I think we're a national leader in parks property in Bellingham for a city of our size, and as we acquire more parks, of course, there's staff needs for maintaining it. So James came to one of our meetings recently and reported on needs in that regard. Leslie Bryson came and spoke to us about future development needs and acquisition needs. Our hope is that as we carry on, we'll have opportunities to speak to other people who can convey important information to us as we sort of ponder what the next levy is going to be. What I can report thus far is that we've generally established some parameters. There's a general agreement that the next levy is going to have a bit more money for development and a bit less for acquisition. We want the next levy to have a bit more for maintenance and operations. Again, the specifics of that not yet established. The project list has been sort of three things. We want the Parks, Recreation, Open Space Plan, of course, informs that. The Greenways Strategic Plan informs that. And there's consensus amongst our group that there also then needs to be some money not clearly identified for those opportunities that come around, for us to be creative about what future sites might be. So we've made some decisions in that regard. I think, as one person said when I said, well, how should I characterize this to the council when I speak to them? And they said, well, you can just say that there's a new relationship as it relates to acquisition, development, and maintenance. We did reach an agreement. The committee's of the opinion that it should be 57 cents. And the reason I know that the council had pondered 50 cents, the story in the paper this week reflected 50 cents, as I recall. And that's an idea. Our position was that the first, second, and third levies have all been 57 cents, and there's just Greenways has acquired a good brand in this community. People have expressed again and again broad support for that amount, so we're not creating a new tax. We're simply reactivating what has been. And so that's ultimately, of course, your decision, but the committee was of the opinion that we should just keep it at that amount that it's always been. We did not go into great specificity in presenting a particular list, as I mentioned. I think you can just go to the Pro Plan, the Greenway Strategic Plan. You can go to the website. There's a great description on the homepage of the Greenways section that describes acquisitions from the 1990 levy, the 1997 levy, the 2006 levy, and it's an amazing list. It's incredible. Just briefly, if I may, do I just have a couple minutes? I'm happy to wrap. Okay, but just since we're on the public record here, the projects that, and this is just some, using 1990 Greenways levy funds, the Beta Baker, parts of the Bellingham part of the Beta Baker Trail, Cornwall Parks Trail, the Interurban Trail, railroad trails from downtown up towards Lake Whatcom, the South Bay Trail, Wharf Street Trail, Whatcom Creek Trail. All of those were these amazing things that make Bellingham what we know it so great. The 1997 levy, Civic Stadium turf. There's always an element that wants us to do some sort of conventional or recreational amenities, and we've always had a broad enough program that we give people everything that things for everybody. Civic Stadium turf, Interurban Trail, Chuckanut Trail, Maritime Heritage Park, Northwest Trails, Laurelwood Trail, Paddon Creek Gorge, the Taylor Street Dock. That was all from the Beyond Greenways levy. Greenways 3, which wanted to emphasize more things on the north side, Cordata Park Extension, Greenways 3 project descriptions that you can find on the website, Paddon Creek daylighting, the trail along there, that happened with Greenways funds, Birchwood Area Park, property up on King and Queen Mountain, some acquisitions out in the Fort Bellingham area, Samish Crest, Paddon Creek Greenway system, all of these things. I mean, it's the glory of Bellingham as we know it today is because of 25 years of Greenways. And I'm just excited to say that there's a committee convened. It's contemplating the next one. We're all committed. I have to say, just because I know you're going to be discussing it later, the committee did express an opinion on the question of timing. The committee is of the opinion that it should be in April. We will rise to the occasion whenever it is, but there was an opinion. I think if I were to try to coalesce all of the attitudes as it related to that amongst the committee, the central thing was simply that there is still work to do and time needed for having a good public process. And we wanted Greenways to be its own item if possible. It's not a necessity. And April just seemed like an appropriate time. I know there are a number of things with the county next year. And that's where we're at right now. I can answer questions later if need be, but in a nutshell, we just wanted to say we're here and happy to be working on the next Greenways levy.
Well, I just want to start by thanking my esteemed predecessor, Seth Fleetwood, and also definitely thanking the committee for all of this work and this dedication, because I need to express that these are all volunteers that are doing this work and how dedicated they are and how much we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Weiss?
Yeah, so just following up on what Seth has indicated from the report of the committee, there were, especially at this last meeting that was held last week, there was quite a bit of discussion about timing. And a lot of that was predicated about the fact that if we wanted to have a ballot item on this year's November election, that today really is the day that we would have to make a choice as to whether or not we'd want to do that or not. And Obviously, there are dates in 2016 that can be chosen as well. I believe there's 4 other possibilities in February, April, August, and November. And there are pros and cons to each one of those dates, including having it in November. If I may, I'd like to go maybe and just run down what some of those issues are for those 4 particular or 5 particular election dates, because that will drive the rest of the discussion that we might have for the rest of today. I mean, we've got, I think, about a half an hour or so to talk if we want.
We have one more item on our committee.
One other short item.
5105.
I don't know how short it is, but yes.
It won't be that short.
You never know.
You never know. So in laying out the options, if we wanted to have a November 2015 election associated with this, the primary advantage to November over any of the other dates in 2016 is that the cost of the ballot itself is free to the city. We have city council members that are running for election. We have the mayor running for election. Those seats are on the ballot already. And according to the rules that the county auditor has established, when you have an item on the ballot, any successive items that you want to put on that same particular ballot are free. You don't have to pay anything. And so if you just have one on, the second one, and anything else, you can have as many as you want, and they're all free. Versus anything else that happens in 2016, because we do not have any local elections in 2016. Even number years are primarily for state and federal issues. Odd number years are typically for local issues. This being a local issue, it is again free, and I think represents an opportunity for us. And the cons of doing that is people have mentioned that they feel like the campaign is not necessarily ready to go and have an election so soon, and that could be. It also could be a way that you actually frame the entire ballot. In my mind, I believe that if we frame it in a general way, where we, as Seth was talking about, there's essentially 3 different categories. There's development, there's acquisition, there's maintenance issues. In my mind, to me it seems like if we went and specified approximate percentages of how we would want to go and do that, and in addition, if there were specific properties or specific projects that we would want to go and identify, we just simply put them in there. For instance, there seems to be a broad consensus of agreement that we would like to go and see what is currently known as the Cornwall Beach Park at the southern end of Cornwall Beach, or Cornwall Avenue, that should be developed into a park using Greenways 4 money. That could be specified as a project. Also, the council recently okayed the purchase of buying a large chunk of land off of Cordata Parkway to develop a north side regional park, and that would be another one that I think there could be general consensus that we'd want to go and maybe just specify that Greenways 4 money could go into the development of that. So in my mind, it seems like we can just, in essence, have a more general description of what those things could be and specify any other exceptions that we'd want. February 9th and April 26th are both similar pros and cons associated with them. They're both springtime special election time slots for ballots. They come. There's an advantage in that you can, at least for the campaign committee, they can go and aggressively search out the base of supporters for Greenways, and it would present a better opportunity for passage that way. It's certainly an advantage. The primary disadvantage is, again, the cost of the election. It'd be $150,000 to $160,000, according to the auditor, who told me that figure last Wednesday or Thursday. And that would come out of the general fund unless we went and came up with a different mechanism. The committee asked me to ask our city attorney whether or not that could be rolled into the cost of the election, and he informed me that, well, Peter, I'll turn it back over to you. Yeah, I know. So, Peter, I'm going to ask the question I told you I would ask. You know, can we throw the cost of $150,000 or $160,000 into the price of, or into the levy itself, if we chose to do a spring 2016 election?
Yeah, the resolution and ballot title can be structured so that you can do that.
Okay. All right, so there's that aspect of it. To do it in August, there is issues associated with August, primarily the ones that I think everybody has, is that it's summertime and we're doing lots of other things, and elections are typically not the thing that we're thinking about. We're thinking more about vacations and recreating, and it seemed like it would be a very difficult time to go and hold an issue such as greenways in an August election. It's available. The other downside is it will cost the city money to go and put it on the ballot. Not as much as $150,000, but it will cost some part of the overall cost of the ballot. And finally, the presidential election in November, that has the opportunity of having a very large turnout, and that's good for the levy. It's also good for just general participation in this particular taxing thing. But the Greenways 4 is a property tax levy, and my understanding, and I've heard confirmation from others, is that the county is planning an EMS property tax levy ask at the same election in November. And to me, it seems like it would hurt both EMS and Greenways to have two property tax levies happening concurrent, that voters might not react to that in a positive way. So in my mind, I think we should steer from August and November 2016. So I wanted to lay those out. There's other issues that we can probably talk about, but I think for the purposes of today's discussion, it's just really the timing, because if we wanted to do November, then there's other things we should talk about. If we chose to do April, then this is really just a report by Seth, and hopefully he'll give other reports in the future as we get close to an April ballot. If it is an April ballot, the council needs to make a decision by February 26th to go and put something on the ballot for April. So that's the end of my report.
Councilmember Waterman?
Yeah, cost-wise, in November, not this November, the following November, if there is an EMS levy on the ballot, which becomes a local, do we know what the cost is? And there are other elections on the ballot. Do we know what the costs are for those?
According to Debbie Edelstein, who's our county auditor, what she said, she couldn't give us a number because I asked that very question. And the reason is that it's a formula. Any state issues, we're going to have legislative races next November, and we're going to have the presidential race. So any state issues or federal issues, the county needs to pick up the cost of those. And whatever the total cost is of the entire ballot in November is going to be split between the different jurisdictions. So the county's got the biggest share because they've got the state and the federal things. If there are local initiatives, such as this or such as EMS, then that will go into this formula, and there'll be kind of an equal sharing associated with it. I really don't know, but it just seemed like it would be anywhere from $25,000 to $75,000 would be my guesstimate, but I really don't know.
Okay, that's what I thought, but it wouldn't be no 150 or 160.
It wouldn't be that much. That's true.
Well, I'd just like to say this has had me tossing and turning in terms of timing, because at first I was all gung-ho for November, but then I started to think about it really intently, especially after I attended the Greenways Levy Committee meeting. I think my gung-ho-ness came from me being a younger person, but as I listened to the people on the committee, I realized I needed to take a step back and really think about this. The thing that concerns me about going for November is that we're still at the philosophical point of discussing a lot of this. We're not at the hard details. And any campaign that needs to go forward really needs to have all of this stuff worked out quite quickly. And I worry about us putting stress on the volunteers that would be doing this work, because we're only as good as our campaign volunteers. The city council does not manage the campaign for this. And the committee was very generous in saying that they did not want to upset the city council in advocating for April. But on the same side of that coin, I don't want to upset our committee members by pushing for November. So I would rather not go forward with vague ideas and ask people for a vote, because I feel like anytime government tries to do fast things like this, it leaves up major skepticism for what is the government trying to push through and what aren't they telling us. And I'm not ready to take that kind of pressure. So I don't think I'll be supporting this resolution.
But I'm not.
Oh, that's right.
Roxanne is.
Councilmember Warren?
Yeah, I also have mixed feelings on it in terms of a number of reasons. I know if we do November, it is pushing it. But I've really got reservations of the cost of doing something in April. Having served on this council after we've come through some really, really hard budgets and tough times in terms of how to get budgets to work, $160,000 is a lot of money. And so we can throw it into a levy. We, the citizens, that's up here, we are the ones paying that cost. What are we willing to take out of the Greenways measure to pay $160,000 for? Are we willing to take out $160,000 out of maintenance costs? Jim, do you have $160,000 extra laying around for maintenance? One of the things we hear, we need this levy because we need to be able to do that. $160,000 buys a whole lot of seasonal workers to do maintenance on the projects that we say we need to do. I have a hard time. I have a hard time saying, yes, this is the best way to win an election, but it's going, we got to pay $160,000 when we could do it for free, which to me, given my fiduciary responsibility to the city, makes a whole lot of sense to me, in terms of spending of money. Or if not, then put it on our following November election, and because again, $20,000 is a whole lot easier to stomach and to take out of budgets that are tight than $160,000. And I know I love the work that the committee does and the volunteers do, and I applaud it. I mean, it's tremendous work. But having been an activist and been an elected, there's very different roles. It's much easier for me when I was an activist to say, spend money on my project, than it is me setting up here figuring out how am I going to make budgets work. And because I have to really consider that. I don't, as an activist, all I have to do is consider this is what I want to achieve. So it's a really tough balancing act that we're asked to do here. And I really wish we weren't on this tight of a, I wish we at least had another month to consider the debate about this rather than it being up this quickly, because it is a very It is a very tough thing. The one thing I can say with certain right now is I will have a very, very tough time supporting an April date. If we don't do this November, then I'm going to push hard for the following November or the August date because of the cost of the cost of doing this. And I really want this to pass. I've been a supporter of and have worked on doorbells, done it for every Greenways out there, and I will again. But I think we have to I think we've done a great job with Greenways in terms of for the public how we use Greenways funding, and I think we have to continue doing that when we go to the voters, saying we are being responsible. We are being responsible with your tax dollars when we do that. And so that's where I'm at right now.
Councilmember Lillquist.
Thanks, Roxanne. Well, first of all, I want to thank Seth and the rest of the citizen committee. This is the right way for a proposal to start, with people in the community talking about what they'd like to see. I also want to mention this is actually a continuation of the council discussion we had at our retreat where we talked about Greenways 4 and just generally what we'd like to see. I'm really enthusiastically supporting what I'm seeing coming forward from the committee. It is pretty much in line with what the council was already anticipating. In particular, I wholeheartedly endorse the downshift in buying properties and an upshift in development and maintenance of the lands we've already acquired. So I'm really liking what I'm seeing here in this proposal. Personally, I actually support the lower levy rate discussed in the packet. I think it's still a substantial number to meet our community's needs. But then we come to the timing issue that you were talking about, Terry. I think you really drew out the conflict, and I agree. As strong as I want to support Greenways, I'm worried about the costs. I would say there is a small possibility that the school district is considering a ballot measure, maybe in February, could be in April, and I think there's an outside chance that if one of the county ballot measures this November fails, it'll be back. So it may or may not be that February, April will be fully as expensive as anticipated, but right now there's no guarantee. If there's no other ballot measure, that will be the cost. It could be half that cost, but we don't know. So I'm not so sure that spring is as harmful as it might be.
Councilmember Hamel.
I've worked on 9 campaigns in the last 14 years, worked on or led, and all of those campaigns began in the beginning of the year, not in August. And so I have very serious concerns around the timeline as expressed by other council members today. I do have questions for Mr. Fleetwood. Is the campaign, or is the Greenways Committee going to be converted into the campaign team? And is there a campaign manager? Is there a marketing message? Is there a budget? We have 12 weeks to come up with, or the committee would. Just want to ask those questions.
Well, to the first question, the Greenways 4 campaign committee, the group that's been convening thus far, anticipates being the levy campaign, and it's the same thing. We'll operate the campaign whenever it happens, and our hope is that we'll have more members. It'll be a broad, inclusive group of people supporting the cause. The second part is, no, those are details that haven't been worked out yet. All the particulars of the campaign itself, of course, will be dependent on when it goes. And we'll rise to the occasion whenever that is. But no, not that set of details yet.
Thank you.
President?
Yes, I've gone back and forth too, but I've come to the conclusion that to put it on November this year is way too soon. We need to do a lot more work, a lot more outreach. And one of the great things about that is now, this time around, we have a smooth Greenways proposal. And it's coming from a committee that knows what they're talking about. They put it together. There's not going to be any alternative. There's not going to be four things looking. Terry and I sat up here last time and went through that whole thing, and it was just by the grace of somebody other than me, it passed. And we were very, very fortunate that time. So I think we have the time. I agree with the money. We can do it November 2016. We can do it whenever we need to. But really, for me, it boils down to enough time for it to be presented and rolled out so we don't get in that trap we got in last time. And I just think, when it was brought up at the retreat, no way did I ever fathom that we'd be doing it this year. I think we were talking about next year from the beginning, but thanks to Seth and the committee. But I think we need to take the time and come up with another date, and we'll have to be discussing this later on tonight because it could take us the whole rest of the afternoon to discuss this. So.
Councilmember Weiss.
Yeah, I just wanted to make clear that the resolution, the work that Peter particularly did, and also Brian, in putting together the packet of materials and the agenda today, that was done in anticipation that if we wanted to have a November vote, that we would. If our committee chooses not to want to choose November, then we just simply don't do anything. If we did want to go and have November, then we would recommend this to tonight for adoption. But I just want to kind of make that clear. And the numbers and the framework in there, I mean, I kind of put a lot of that stuff in there just based on what I was hearing from a lot of people and tried to put that in as placeholders, both the 50 cent and the approximate breakout between development, acquisition, and maintenance. Those were all in there as placeholders, and that we would end up discussing that if we wanted to choose November. If we choose not to do November, then I think we probably would rely more on the committee to come back to us with a more specific recommendation of whatever it might need to look like. So.
Can I just make one clarification?
Yes, please.
When I was going through a list of the items that we've acquired with Greenways money, I said the Padden Creek daylighting project. Of course, that is a public works project. I meant to talk about the greenways around Padden Creek.
But you forgot Chuckanut Ridge.
Oh,
I can't believe it.
I was waiting for him to say that, and you whip it out.
There's a ton of other things that I didn't that could have been included.
Okay.
Councilmembers, is there a motion?
For as much as I would like to see November, if there isn't a full support, a consensus within our group, I can't support November, even though I think it's irresponsible for us not to do November. But I just, if there's not a full consensus, there may not be a full consensus in April, from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and I have similar feelings, so I would just prefer to not make any kind of motion and take it up tonight.
There you go.
Okay.
The discussion fails due to lack of a motion. Okay, so anything further, council members, on this? Seeing none. Okay, I will move on to the next agenda item.
Thanks, Seth.
Thank you so much. Second agenda item for today is a discussion of repurposing the locomotive at Bloedel Donovan Park. We have James King with us. Will you please take us away?
Thank you, James King, Parks and Recreation Department. So, as reported back in April on the 20th to you, the locomotive located at Bloedel Donovan is in poor condition, behind a chain link fence and not being taken care of very well. So we, in response to interest from some folks in the community, and with your direction, we went out with requests for letters of interest, and those came back. We did receive 3 letters of interest. One of those was disqualified because it came in past the deadline. Of the 2 that are left, I think it's important to note as well for the record that the locomotive, for liability reasons, is not a safe recreational item, something for people to be able to climb on like it was in the past for safety purposes. So from the two letters of interest that we got, which are included in the packet, we are recommending that after we evaluated them and really took a hard look at them, the one from Northwest Railway Museum was the most responsive to the conditions that we asked for in the request for letters of interest. And we would make the recommendation to you that we be able to move forward with negotiations directly with the Northwest Railway Museum. As just to clarify process, we're using the surplus property process, and in the code it allows for council to come up with a process. There's three different options, and one of those options is for council to come up with a process for surplusing property that is in the range between $1,000 and $20,000 in value, which we feel this locomotive is somewhere in that range. So our request to you again is to be able to get direction from you to move forward with negotiating with the Railway Museum and hopefully surplus it. I guess the big picture question is the community, is the council supportive of moving that locomotive out of Bellingham? That's the bottom line of this proposal.
Councilmember Weiss?
I had two questions for you, James. One was, how do you establish what the value is after you've chosen a particular, respondee to this letter of interest? And then second is, did our local railway museum show any interest in this?
So the answer to the second one was no, they did not put forward a proposal. Value is a difficult thing to come up with. The easy way to value it is the value of the scrap metal. We determined from the very beginning that wasn't an alternative, that we didn't want to see it go for scrap. What we've seen, again, it's all across the board, but there's not a lot of value in selling it. Likely any kind of deal would be very low dollar. It would be, the thing that, when we evaluated these things, the thing we liked about the Northwest Railway Museum is they're all about the public. They're very organized, they're very well funded, they have 7 full-time employees, they have a couple of big buildings and a museum. They're about giving, they have a railroad, they're about giving people rides on old locomotives and in old cars and fixing things up and letting people experience that incredible history of this part of the country. And so this particular locomotive could add to that. But again, this isn't, we don't anticipate this being a moneymaker for the city.
Council members? Councilmember Borneman?
Yeah, I will make a motion to recommend that staff move forward with negotiations with the Northwest Railroad Museum.
Okay, we have a motion to authorize the Parks Department to negotiate directly with the Northwest Railway Museum to surplus the locomotive at Blodell Donovan Park. Any discussion?
Yeah, as the last one was a difficult one, this one's really difficult for me because my grandfather was the only one that ran that train from 1918 to 1940, for 42 years until 1960. I was on the train when they dedicated it to the city of Bellingham. And I feel partly responsible because over the last few years it's just gotten forgotten. We haven't kept it up. They made a beautiful plaque with his name on it. I've got the article framed in my office, and it's just, it's really hard for me, but I fully understand that the parks plan that's coming forward does not have that area in it, and I'm really disappointed, I have to say this, because I've supported the Railway Museum in Bellingham. I will continue to support them, but it's really a crying shame they couldn't come together and come up with a proposal to keep this in Bellingham. There's a lot of history there. Like I said, it's just a tough decision for me, but I fully understand where the committee's going. But James, you mentioned 1,000 to 20,000. So when you come back, is that what you're going to bring back, or do we have to come up with the value?
No, we would do that.
You do that?
We'll go through that process of trying to come up with a value. What we've learned so far is there isn't a lot of value to it. It's very expensive for anybody to, number one, move it because it's so big and so heavy. And then number two, restoration is amazing on those things. They have to rebuild so many of the parts. It's a very expensive process. So the actual locomotive as it sits today, there's not much value to it. But yes, we will bring what we've discovered and any deal that we've been able to reach with the museum back to council to make a final decision.
And I really want to put a plug in for Peter Adams. He has been so enthusiastic about that locomotive from day one. He was referred by the Railway Museum to James and I. We've spent a lot of time with him. He very eager to get in there and do the work, it's just a tough position for me to be in. I have to wear two hats. One as a council member, one as a citizen. So I will. I'll contemplate before tonight.
And you submitted the letter late? Were you the one that submitted the letter late?
No, I didn't submit the letter. No, I did not submit any letter. I think both applicants fully understand. Yeah, both applicants fully understand that it's up to the council. So I'm not going to. No, that's enough out of me.
I just wanted to say I really appreciated that historical perspective, and I lift my hands to your family for all of that work. So the motion on the floor is to authorize the Parks Department to negotiate directly with Northwest Railway Museum to surplus the locomotive at Blodell Donovan Park. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And we will bring this forward tonight at our council meeting this evening and end of committee.
Thank you.